Hello and welcome back to On Air with Dr. Pete. I'm your host, Dr. Pete Economou, and of course, always excited to be here and happy that you chose to tune in and listen today. If you feel like this year has escaped you, you are not alone. It's escaped a lot of us, and I feel like this is where I become my parents, where they would say things like enjoy your childhood or time flies as you get older, and you really notice that in life, even being mindful. And we are rapidly approaching the end of 2024, where we just started this On Air with Dr. Pete, and I guess we could say a year's done, even though it's only been a few episodes. It's important to take a step back and learn to grow and appreciate how far you've come this year. The thing, don't only wait for that end of the year to do that reflection, because maybe you didn't accomplish all that you wanted to this year, and so it can be a good time to start dreaming up some new goals. And don't wait for January 1st. Whenever you're listening to this, it might be December 20th. Do it today. Why do you got to wait? Use the good china on a Sunday. You don't have to wait for holidays. So we're closing out this year together. And I am just really thrilled. I want feedback. And as a high performer, former athlete, I am okay with constructive criticism. So please keep it coming because, friends, loved ones, and those listeners have given some feedback and looking to incorporate it all. And I've got some really great ideas, producer and I, and plan with some very special guests. And we're going to kind of keep building that. So, make sure that you keep giving us some ideas because this is about you. But we're not quite done with this year yet. So holidays are still on the horizon. What do you got planned? And that can also bring mixed emotions. I was with a colleague recently, and this will be their first, holiday without their partner, and it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment, and it's not to say it brings up all kinds of emotions, right? Obviously, sad is the thing you hear, but also there's a lot of other, emotions that people feel, this time of year, and so in that picture perfect world, we're expected to be a little less Grinch and a little more jolly, but that's not always the case. Many of us vary from time to time, and maybe there's this is the other thing I realize is there might be a family member that you love because they're your family member, but you might not fully like them. And that's weird for people to hear, and certainly I've got clients that kind of work through some of that. But, there's also, if you're listening and you're alive, you likely have some family drama, because I've really not seen one family that does not have any. So there's all this types of conflict there. There could be, as I said about my colleague, like grieving the loss of a loved one. And then some general anxiety about the holidays. Everything's got to be perfect and gifts and all the kind of stuff that goes into it. So you are not alone. I want you to take a deep breath and just know that everything we struggle with is temporary. And that's how we get through these hectic times. That's the foundation of mindfulness. Everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever. The year doesn't last. And one of our biggest Zen stories is the trees don't get sad that the leaves leave them. And if you're on the East Coast like me, and that we had like a weird warm fall. And so to the point where, some trees or even flowers started to rebloom. But in general, we're getting to that place of that winter feel where there are no more leaves on the trees. And so that's okay. They're not holding on to it. That's letting go. That's impermanence. So this December is here. I've been thinking a lot about the holidays, about how we can make some small but in fact impactful changes, because that's that celebrate small victories, concept from mindfulness. You don't want to forget, sometimes just getting up, getting to the gym, submitting a paper, finishing a course, ending a term with the professional organization. All these things are, required to be celebrated. Slow down, because those small changes, victories, have a very large, significant impact on our lives. So if you feel that the holidays have lost their true meaning and it's all about just buying bigger, better, or more, then this podcast is for you. So I was watching, and Lee and I were talking about this Netflix documentary, Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy. Have you seen that? It was really like drastic and eye-opening about consumerism. And so I know that all of you probably felt the same. If you haven't watched it yet, tune into it. But this documentary explores the rise of online retail and how it exacerbated overconsumption in our country. So perhaps you're like me, where that truck just comes down the driveway again and is bringing something else. And really how easy it is. Just this morning I was like, I need more 9-volt batteries. Boom. Here they are. They're going to be here tomorrow. And so that overconsumption is there. Now, the batteries were for my fire detectors, so that's important. But there is an overconsumption. So it's an interesting perspective, and I want consider watching it. And it's got me thinking, because we literally have everything we need at our fingertips with the touch of a button. And if you grew up in the 90s, which if you've listened to me before and anything else, shout out to the 90s. I feel like that was the best time. That you maybe watch, like me, grew up with the Jetsons. And I always like to use that metaphor because I feel like we're sort of living the Jetsons now, And so if you never watched the Jetsons, Google it. If you're Generation Z or any of that, you may have never even heard of it. But they had the idea of like pressing a button and your food was delivered. And we're like, that's so weird, There's snack machines and you can get that, but you can't get a full meal delivered to your house. Yeah, you can. Very quickly, too. And if it's like more than 30 minutes, I'm annoyed, Even living in suburban or kind of more rural area. So do we really need all this stuff? I, with the Zen practice, look around and say, how do I keep practicing minimalism? And so if you don't know what minimalism is, it's just what it suggests. It's how do I live with as little as possible? And not every Zen or meditating person does that. Not every clergy does that. And I'm not even, a clergy or any of those types of things, but trying to live with as little as possible. Now, I like nice things and I'm often seeking more, so it's not to say that I don't want a nice pair of shoes here and there and you let go of everything. But do I need 6 cookie trays? Do I need 7 Buddha statues? Do I need all those magnets? Like the things that you sort of have overconsumption of, do I need all of them? So, because here's the thing. The less cluttered we are, the more peaceful we feel. We have lots of research that shows this, relationship between, a correlation between, hoarding and, say, mental health. And so if one is hoarding, their mental health is often really poor. And so having all that kind of stuff that's just around you and cluttered, it often is a external image of what is going on internally, meaning minimalism allows for some more peace inside. It creates space to say, I don't need stuff. And when I'm cluttered with those material possessions, it might be the perfect time to reset. Take a look around and do you see things that you don't need? And sometimes we call them tchotchkes. It's one of my favorite words, actually. How many tchotchkes do you need? Each tchotchke has to be cleaned and dusted. So much of what I strive to do in daily life is give back in the holiday season too. And so with looking at clutter or things that you have, can you look at the stuff and, are there things to be donated? Or maybe take some of your hard-earned money or your precious time and find some ways to limit this spending and maybe give back, right? So that's another thing to think about this time of year. Another, body of literature is around volunteerism. And so philanthropy really has been a part of my life, but not in a selfless kind of way, to be honest. I recognize, and one of the things I'll say a lot is Mother Teresa did what she did and knew that she benefited from it too. I think she's a saint. I should probably know that. But when we're doing good, it doesn't mean we do good for and then, leave it. Of course, that's what you want to do in a mindfulness way. You do good and leave it there. But also we can do good knowing that there's a larger thing happening. My good makes someone else feel good, which kind of trickles down, sort of thinking about it in that way. And so I wanted to, talk a little bit today about the ways that you can do, some of your own philanthropic activities. Again, doesn't have to be giving millions of dollars some of these billionaires out there, but there are really thousands and hundreds of charities throughout the country that are willing to accept, your money, of course. I mean, who's not? But that's the thing. Let that connect with your values. So I know when I just said that, you're like, oh, well, this organization does this, this, and this with that money, and they serve that to this, and, because it doesn't align with your values. But find a thing that aligns with your values. And so for a long time, one of the things I would do is I went to a pretty privileged high school, and when I was living up in the inner city, I did this during Christmas time, which that was the only thing that bothered me about it, because why only during Christmas do people do volunteerism? Why can't we do that in June or May or, any time of the year? But here we were, and we would take a bus up with these, privileged high school kids and come to a homeless shelter in the inner city and cook a meal and just share an experience, where it was, for me, it was always about the shared experience. We would cook and actually serve and, decorate and have music. And some of the kids, I think, were in a band, so we sang carols. And, some of that stuff might feel patronizing for some folks, but the experience, so I really worked with some of these kids to sit down and talk to some of these homeless folks, and there's just so many benefits of there. So, improving mood, decreasing some of the depression, isolation. That's this whole idea within philanthropic sort of or volunteerism of altruism. Altruism is I do good just for the sake of doing good. Even in altruistic activity, we feel good. So there is something that we benefit from that. And what I encourage you to do is step outside the bubble. So if it's in an area where you don't usually go, or with an organization, or with a bunch of, different demographic, try that. That's likely what you want to do, because that's how we grow. Getting uncomfortable is what makes us grow. So, so in talking about growth, maybe a few weeks ago you tuned in, MB Paradise was here, shout out to her again. And she had her inspirational story about how she found ways to give back to a local athlete in her community. Her story was so cool. And I was telling a colleague about that recently, where, and just to let you, behind the curtain, I have met MB Paradise before I realized it. And we had a great, conversation. And then right as we were signing off, I was like, I know you. And it was after. And so shame on me for that. But it was, she's just inspiring, and others have followed in her footsteps. So now I realize that we're all insanely busy, right? There's no question about that. And we are pulled in millions of different directions, especially if you've got little children, multiple roles. All of us, we've got multiple roles. And so if you may also be thinking, well, I don't got the time for that. And you're right. You might not have time to volunteer 100 hours a year, but what if you think about just a small way that you can give back, and start now, this holiday season. So it might mean, taking kids to a local food pantry. You don't have to do anything as big as I did where, by the way, it wasn't that big, but we did cook for 2 days and, get the kids to get permission and the buses and all that type of stuff. So there's no question that sacrifice goes into that. And, sacrifice is worth it. Nothing that is worth it is easy. So you may also be able to volunteer at a local shelter, or just donate some blood, or something like this. Even if you're afraid of needles or afraid of blood, so there's really so much. People, we are all suffering. So we know that from the Zen and meditative world, and so people are in need. And just thinking about little small steps, especially this time of year, just to reflect on sort of what your purpose is, where do you want to go in life, and what can you do to kind of help somebody else? So I'm in New Jersey. I never shy away from that. And so there are some really great resources. So newjersey.gov has a whole website on volunteer centers. But each state and region will have that. So check that out. Good old Google, Dr. Google. Check it out. Say volunteer centers near me. And maybe from your whatever state you're in .gov, there likely might be some kind of resource page there. So, your time's precious just as much as, giving your time to me to listen to this episode. I appreciate that. And so whether it's your time that you're volunteering or your money, just think about something that you might be willing to do. Because that will have a lasting impact on the lives of others. And that is a big piece about, compassion. And I really believe that if we learn just to spend a little less money, kind of coming back to that documentary that we were talking about, Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy. What if we were just a little bit smarter with it and, buying a little less material possessions and spending more time lending a helping hand, we'd be better off. And I can guarantee you, if you look at your screen time or whatever, you Droid or app, whatever you got, there's time. There's always time about ways you can do it. It's sort of like when I'm working with somebody who might have met someone that they're romantically interested in. They're like, yeah, well, I just don't have the time. And I will tell you that like 100% of the time, that means that's just somebody's not into the other person. And that's okay. That's life. Not everyone's going to be everyone's, flavor. And so trying to recognize that when it's right, it's right. And so there's always time for anything that anybody wants. And so you likely now have just kind of realized that, yeah, you could have some time to maybe just volunteer somewhere about that. I moved out of the inner city. Like now I really miss that experience that I would do in that December month. So really trying to think about ways that I can do that now that I've moved, many years later. But certainly with a lot of the teams that I work with, or the university, there's opportunities to volunteer. It's a little bit easier when you're in these kind of environments. So it might be harder for you in the real world. We just want to take little small steps. So if there's one thing that allow yourself to take away this holiday season, I ask you to take a close look at what's serving you. What's serving you well and what's no longer serving you. Because releasing is critical. So this year's coming to an end, and we want to just let go of some of that heavy baggage. Oftentimes I'll say to clients, leave it here. You don't have to carry this bag. A lot of us are carrying a knapsack on our shoulders, and it is full with a lot of our stuff. Can we let it go? I can pretty much promise you, my mom always said don't promise anything, but I could almost promise you that any time spent dedicated to volunteering will be time well spent. You will reap benefits of it, as will the other people that are, receiving it. I've never regretted it. It's sort of like the gym, sometimes it's hard to get to the gym. Can you hear me on that? It's like, ugh. But you've never finished a workout and said, I wish I didn't do that. Same thing with volunteering. You've never, finished and didn't. Like Special Olympics, it's one of the organizations we work a lot with in the world of sports. And you've never left one of those events and said, I wish I didn't do that. So this podcast is just one part of how I plan to make an impact in my own daily life. And I truly hope it'll impact you as well. That's why it's little snippets, I'm not going to sit here and talk for 3 hours, but little snippets to see what you can gain from this. So I would love to hear from you and how you find ways to volunteer in your community. Maybe you have some ideas that we can put on the website. So please feel free to send us your stories, share your photos, and these other things of inspiration at officialdrpete.com on how you're helping out this holiday season. We would love to hear these inspirational stories. Really trying to recognize and create space for that positivity. So I'm Dr. Pete. Thank you always for tuning in today. If you love this episode, please head to our social channels. Everything's at Official Dr. Pete, where you can like, follow, and share. Please do so with your friends and loved ones and all places where you listen to your podcasts. And we will see you next week. Until then, spread a little love, kindness, and stay well.